The human diplomat's skull shattered like an eggshell as the alien warlord smacked his fist down in a rage. Daniel Peterson's lifeless body crumpled to the floor, blood pooling around his head. "Get this human filth off my ship!" High Commander Yaris snarled at his guards. They dragged Peterson's corpse away, leaving a crimson smear across the polished deck. Yaris turned to the view screen, still seething. The negotiations with the humans had been a farce from the start. Did they really think he would accept anything less than total submission? Earth would bow before the might of the Yadaran Empire, or burn. He had made that very clear to their diplomat, but the human had the audacity to refuse, to threaten the Yadarans with resistance. Well, he had shown them the price of defiance. "Set course for the human homeworld," Yaris ordered. "We will grind them beneath our heel." As the Yadaran fleet jumped to hyperspace, they were unaware that Peterson had transmitted one final message before his death, a warning to Earth of the coming invasion. On Earth, chaos erupted at the news. Their defenses were strong, but untested against Yadaran weapons. Panic surged as their doomsday scenario unfolded. In desperation, Earth's leaders turned to their last hope, Wayne Allen, a brilliant military mind but a loose cannon, known for his unorthodox tactics and blatant insubordination. But now the future of the human race rested in his hands. Allen took command of Earth's space fleet with a single directive: stop the Yadarans at any cost. Failure meant the end of human freedom. As the Yadaran warships hurtled towards Earth, humanity braced for the fight of their lives. The murder of Daniel Peterson had sealed the aliens' fate, for they had sown the seeds of their own destruction. They would soon learn the true depths of human wrath and ingenuity unleashed. As the Yadaran armada loomed ever closer to Earth, Wayne Allen knew that fighting them head-on was suicide. He had to get creative and fast. Allen leaned over the tactical display, studying the enemy fleet's formation. "All right, here's the plan," he announced to his bridge crew. "We're going to play a little game of hide-and-seek with these alien bastards. Helmsman, take the majority of our ships and position them behind the moon, out of sight. Comms, I want a small detachment of cruisers to break off and approach the Yadarans. They're going to be our bait." The officers nodded, hurrying to carry out his orders. Allen watched as the bulk of Earth's fleet slipped behind the moon's bulk, while a handful of ships sped towards the approaching Yadaran armada. On the Yadaran flagship, High Commander Yaris sneered at the view screen. The pitiful human ships were charging straight at them, weapons hot. "Fools," he spat. "They dare challenge us with such a meager force. Gunnery, blast them out of the sky." The Yadaran ships opened fire, their advanced weaponry tearing through the human vessels smoothly. One by one, the Earth cruisers were reduced to molten slag. Yaris grinned sadistically as the last human ship exploded in a ball of flame. "So much for Earth's last hope," he gloated. But his victory was short-lived. Just as the final cruiser disintegrated, a massive barrage of nuclear missiles streaked out from behind the moon, slamming into the rear of the Yadaran fleet. The aliens were caught totally off guard, their shields down. Explosions rippled across their ships, hulls buckling and rupturing under the onslaught. "What trickery is this?" Yaris roared, his face contorted with rage. On the bridge of his flagship, consoles sparked and alarms blared. He hit his fist down, denting the metal. "Damage report now." His tactical officer scrambled to assess the situation. "Sir, we've lost a third of our ships. The humans, they were hiding behind the moon. We never saw them coming." Yaris seethed with fury, his eyes burning with hatred. He had underestimated the humans and it had cost him dearly, but this battle was far from finished. "All ships, regroup and prepare for a full assault," he snarled. "We will raze their cities to ash and grind their bones to dust." Back on Earth, Allen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. His gambit had paid off, but he knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The Yadarans would regroup and come at them twice as hard now. They needed a game-changer, and fast. An idea struck him then, a crazy, desperate plan. He opened a comm channel to the surface. "Get me Dr. Isaac Weston," he ordered. "Tell him it's time to roll the dice on that wormhole project of his. We're out of options." Dr. Weston's face flickered on the comm screen, his eyes alight with excitement despite the dire situation. "Commander Allen, we've done it. The wormhole is stable and ready for use. But there's a catch. It's only big enough for a single ship to pass through." Hallen leaned forward, his mind racing with possibilities. "A single ship, you say? That might be all we need. What if we send a small team through, heavily armed, and emerge right behind the Yadaran fleet? We could strike directly at their command ship, take out that bastard Yaris and his lackeys. It might just throw them into enough chows to give us a fighting chance." Dr. Weston nodded, his expression grave. "It's risky, but it could work. You'll need your best pilots and soldiers for this, Commander. It's a one-way trip until we can stabilize the wormhole further." "I'll lead the mission myself," Allen declared. "I'm not sending my people on a suicide run without being there to see it through." He turned to his comm officer. "Get me Lieutenant Reed. Tell him to assemble a strike team, the best of the best. We're going to need every bit of skill and guts we can muster for this one." Marcus Reed stood at attention in the hangar bay, his helmet tucked under his arm. He was young for a lieutenant, but his reputation as a fearless and talented pilot had earned him a place on this critical mission. Around him, the strike team checked their weapons and gear, their faces grim with dedication. Allen strode into the hangar, his eyes scanning the assembled soldiers. "You all know what's at stake here," he said, his voice carrying over the hum of machinery. "Earth is counting on us. We're going to hit the Yadarans where it hurts, and we're not coming back until the job is done. Mount up." As the team boarded the heavily modified destroyer, the deck shuddered beneath their feet. The Yadaran assault had begun, the alien ships tearing into Earth's orbital defenses with ruthless efficiency. On the view screens, Earth's ships fought back valiantly, but the superior Yadaran technology was taking its toll. Down on the planet's surface, cities trembled as the sky lit up with fire. Millions huddled in fear, watching the battle rage overhead, praying for a miracle. Allen settled into the command chair, his mind focused as he watched the wormhole generator power up. "Dr. Weston, we're in position, ready when you are." "Initiating wormhole in 3-2-1 Mach." Weston's voice crackled over the comm. Her shimmering vortex burst to life before them, its edges crackling with energy. Allen clutched the armrests as Reed guided the ship forward, the destroyer shuddering as it passed through the wormhole's event horizon. For a moment, the world outside the viewport stretched and distorted, colors and shapes blurring together in a dizzying kaleidoscope. Then, with a bone-jarring lurch, they emerged into normal space once more. The Yadaran fleet filled the screens, their angular ships spread out before them like a swarm of angry insects. And there, at the center of the formation, loomed the massive bulk of Yaris's command ship. "So we've got a clear shot," Reed called out, his fingers dancing over the helm controls. "All forward batteries, fire at will," Allen roared. "Let's show these alien scum what happens when you mess with Earth." The destroyer's guns erupted, lances of searing light arcing out across the void to slam into the Yadaran command ship's shields. The alien vessel shuddered under the barrage, its defenses flickering as the relentless assault battered them down. On the bridge of the Yadaran flagship, Yaris howled with rage as warning sirens blared. "What is happening? Where did that human ship come from?" "They're targeting our shield generators," his tactical officer reported, panic edging his voice. "Our defenses are failing." Yaris smacked his fist down, the metal crumpling under the blow. "Impossible. Destroy them now." But it was too late. With a final devastating salvo, the human destroyer's weapons tore through the command ship's weakened shields and ripped into its hull. Explosions blossomed across the Yadaran vessel, fire spewing from gaping wounds in its armor. Allen watched the destruction unfold, a grim smile on his face. They had struck a blow against the Yadarans, but the battle was not nearly finished. The rest of the alien fleet was already turning towards them, weapons charging. "It's all right, people, let's make this count," Allen shouted over the comm. "We've got their attention now, so let's give 'em hell." The destroyer pivoted to face the oncoming Yardaran ships, its guns blazing defiantly as it prepared to take on the full might of the alien armada. Earth's fate hung in the balance, and Wayne Allen was determined to make the Yardarans pay for every inch of space with blood. As Allen's ship plunged into the shimmering vortex of the wormhole, the crew braced themselves for the unknown. Colors swirled and distorted around them, the fabric of space-time stretching and warping in a dizzying dance. The ship shuddered violently, its hull groaning under the immense forces at play. "Hold on tight!" Allen shouted over the din of alarms and creaking metal. "We're in for a bumpy ride." Seconds stretched into eternity as they hurtled through the wormhole's twisting depths. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. The ship emerged into normal space once more, the inky void of the cosmos replacing the kaleidoscopic maelstrom. "Status report," Allen barked, his eyes scanning the view screens. "We've emerged behind the Yardaran fleet, sir," Lieutenant Reed reported from the helm. "They haven't detected us yet." Allen allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. His gambit had worked. They had the element of surprise on their side. He quickly located Yaris's command ship on the tactical display, its massive bulk looming at the center of the Yardaran formation. "All right, let's get in position to—" Allen began, but Reed cut him off. "Sir, I'm picking up something strange on the sensors. A group of smaller Yardaran ships is breaking away from the main fleet, heading towards that asteroid field." Allen frowned, studying the display. What are they up to? They're in the middle of a battle. Why would they split their forces? Reed hesitated for a moment, then spoke up. "Commander, I think those might be prison ships. They could be holding the human delegates from the failed negotiations." Allen felt a chill run down his spine. He had assumed the delegates were dead, executed by Yaris in a fit of rage. But if they were still alive, being held captive by the Yardarans— He wrestled with the decision, his mind racing. Stick to the plan and take out Yaris, or risk everything to save the prisoners? Every instinct told him to press the attack, but the thought of leaving his fellow humans to the mercy of the Yardarans sickened him. "Damn it all," he muttered under his breath. Then louder, "All right, change of plans. We're splitting up. Reed, take a team and board those prison ships. Get our people out of there. I'll lead the attack on Yaris's command ship." Reed nodded, his face grim. "Understood, sir. We won't let you down." As Reed gathered his team and prepared to disembark, Allen turned to the rest of the crew. "This is it, people. We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." Reed's shuttle streaked towards the Yardaran prison ships, hugging the contours of the asteroids to avoid detection. But as they drew closer, the Yardaran sensors picked them up. Alarms blared aboard the alien vessels, their guns swiveling to track the intruders. "Evasive maneuvers," Reed shouted, gripping the controls tightly. The shuttle jinked and wove, narrowly avoiding the searing beams of Yardaran weapons fire. With a bone-jarring impact, they slammed into the docking bay of the nearest prison ship, the shuttle's armored prow crumpling the alien metal. Reed and his team leaped from the smoking wreckage, weapons at the ready. Yardaran guards swarmed towards them, energy blades crackling. Reed's team met them head-on, the confined space of the ship's corridors erupting into a brutal close-quarters melee. On the bridge of Yaris's command ship, the warlord watched in disbelief as a human vessel appeared seemingly out of nowhere, its weapons already blazing as it bore down on his location. "All guns, fire!" he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "Destroy that ship!" But Allen's attack had caught them off guard, and the command ship's defenses were slow to respond. The human ship's weapons tore into the Yardaran hull, explosions blossoming across its armored surface. Allen gritted his teeth as the deck shuddered beneath his feet, sparks cascading from overloaded consoles. "Keep firing," he shouted over the chaos. "We've got to breach their hull." With a final, devastating salvo, the human ship's guns punched through the weakened Yardaran armor. Allen and his team, clad in armored spacesuits, leaped through the jagged opening, weapons blazing as they fought their way deeper into the alien ship. On Earth, the skies above the planet's major cities burned as the Yardaran assault continued unabated. Buildings crumbled and fires raged as the alien ships poured devastation down upon the surface. In the command bunker, deep beneath the surface, Earth's leaders watched the screens with mounting despair. The planet's defenses were failing, the Yardaran fleet moving inexorably closer. "Where is Alan?" the president demanded, his face pale. "Has there been any word from his team?" The communications officer could only shake his head, his expression grim. "No, sir, not since they entered the wormhole. We have to assume." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. The president closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping. Had he sent Earth's best and brightest to their deaths? Had he doomed humanity with his desperate gamble? The fate of the world hung in the balance as, high above, Alan and Reed fought their separate battles against the overwhelming might of the Yardaran war machine. The clock was ticking, and time was running out for Earth. The acrid stench of burning metal and charred flesh filled Reed's nostrils as he and his team fought their way through the narrow corridors of the Yardaran prison ship. Sparks flew from shattered control panels, and the deck shuddered beneath their feet with each exchange of weapons fire. "Cell block ahead," Sergeant Hawkins called out, consulting the schematics on his wrist display. "Heavily guarded, sir." Reed nodded grimly, his grip tightening on his pulse rifle. "Then we'll just have to hit them harder. Flash grenades on my mark." The team moved into position, hugging the walls on either side of the corridor. Reed held up 3 fingers, counting down silently. As his last finger dropped, they tossed the grenades around the corner. Blinding light and deafening sound erupted from the devices. Stunning the Yardaran guards, Reed's team surged forward, cutting down the disoriented aliens with precise bursts of weapons fire. They reached the cell block door, its heavy metal frame dented and scarred from the battle. Corporal Jensen stepped forward, attaching a breaching charge to the lock. "Stand clear," he warned before detonating the explosive. The door blew inward, crashing to the floor in a cloud of smoke. Reed charged through, his rifle sweeping the room for threats. Inside, a group of haggard human prisoners blinked in the sudden light, their faces gaunt and bruised. Among them, Reed recognized the distinguished features of Ambassador John Nichols. "Ambassador Nichols," Reed called out, lowering his weapon, "we're here to get you out." Nichols stumbled forward, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Thank God," he croaked, his voice hoarse. "I thought we were done for." As Jensen and Hawkins worked to free the other prisoners from their restraints, Nichols grasped Reed's arm urgently. "Lieutenant, listen to me," he said, his tone grave. "The Yardaran's technology, their ships, their weapons, it all relies on a rare mineral called yardenium. They mine it from a single planet in their home system." Reed's brow furrowed. "Yardenium, what are you saying, Ambassador?" "I'm saying that if you can disrupt their yardenium supply, it could cripple their military machine. It might be our only chance to turn the tide of this war." Reed's mind raced, the implications of Nichols' words sinking in. He activated his comlink, patching through to Alan on the Yardaran command ship. "Commander, this is Reed. We've secured the prisoners and Ambassador Nichols has some critical intel. The Yardaran's tech is powered by a mineral called yardenium, mined from a single planet. If we can cut off their supply—" "We might just have a shot at beating them," Alan finished, his voice crackling over the link. Reed could hear the sounds of intense combat in the background. "Good work, Reed. Now get those prisoners back to the ship and rejoin the battle. I've got a date with Yaris on the bridge." As the link disconnected, Reed turned to his team. "You heard the man. Let's move." They hustled the freed prisoners back through the ship's corridors, their progress slowed by the weakened captives. Yardaran reinforcements poured into the passageways, forcing Reed and his team to fight for every meter. Back on the command ship, Alan and his soldiers battled their way onto the bridge, pulse rifles blazing. Yaris's elite guards fell before their onslaught, the deck slick with blood and gore. In the chaos, Alan found himself face to face with Yaris, the alien warlord's eyes burning with hatred. They lunged at each other, weapons forgotten as they grappled in a brutal hand-to-hand brawl. Yaris banged his head into Alan's ribs, the blow cracking bone. Alan retaliated with a vicious headbutt, splitting the alien's scaly skin. They traded blows with savage intensity, each driven by their own unyielding dedication. As they clashed, Alan bared his teeth in a bloody grin. "It's over, Yaris," he snarled, dodging a wild swing. "We know about Yadinium. We know your weakness." Yaris roared in fury, his attacks becoming even more frenzied. "You know nothing, human filth. Earth will burn and your people will be slaves." They crashed into a console, sparks flying as they grappled. Alan felt Yaris's claws rake across his face, blood streaming into his eyes. He retaliated with a crushing elbow to the alien's throat. The battle raged on, both leaders taking grievous wounds but refusing to yield. The fate of Earth hung in the balance as they pitted their skills and commitment against each other in a desperate struggle for supremacy. Meanwhile, Reed and the rescued prisoners fought their way back to their ship, Yadaran weapons fire scorching the air around them. They piled into the vessel, sealing the hatch behind them. As the ship blasted away from the Yadaran fleet, Ambassador Nichols slumped into a seat, exhaustion etched on his face. "We have to get this information back to Earth," he said, his voice heavy with urgency. "The Yadinium, it could change everything." Reed nodded, his lips pursed as he watched the Yadaran ships receding on the console. The battle was a long way to go, but they had gained a glimmer of hope, a chance to strike back against the alien invaders and save their homeworld from annihilation. On the bridge of the Yadaran command ship, Alan and Yaris continued their desperate struggle, blood and sweat mingling as they traded blows with bone-crunching force. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, as the human commander and the alien warlord fought with every ounce of strength and skill they possessed. The battle had reached a critical point, both leaders battered and bleeding but refusing to back down. The next few moments would decide the course of the war and the future of Earth itself. Alan's fist slammed into Yaris's jaw with a sickening crunch, sending the alien warlord staggering back. Yaris snarled, his eyes blazing with hatred as he lunged at Alan, claws outstretched. But the human commander was ready, sidestepping the attack and driving his knee into Yaris's gut. The Yadaran leader doubled over, gasping for breath. Alan pressed his advantage, grappling Yaris from behind and wrenching his arms back. Yaris thrashed and bucked, but Alan's grip was unbreakable. "It's over, Yaris," Alan growled, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "You've lost." Yaris spat a mouthful of blood onto the deck. "You think this changes anything, human? My people will never stop until your pathetic species is wiped from the galaxy." Alan hauled Yaris to his feet, shoving him towards a group of human soldiers. "Get this piece of shit to the brig," he ordered, "and make sure he's secure. I don't want any surprises." As Yaris was dragged away, still hurling curses and threats, Alan turned to his team. They were battered and bloody, but their eyes shone with a fierce grit. "All right, people, let's get to work," Alan said, striding towards the command ship's communications array. "It's time to let the Yadarans know that their leader is our guest." The team set to work hacking into the Yadaran network, their fingers flying over the alien controls. Within minutes, they had gained access to the fleet-wide broadcast system. Alan stepped up to the console, his face grim. "Attention all Yadaran ships," he began, his voice booming across the airwaves. "This is Commander Wayne Allen of the Earth Defense Force. We have captured your leader, High Commander Yaris. He is now our prisoner." A murmur of shock and disbelief rippled through the Yadaran fleet. On the bridge of each ship, crews exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to proceed without their commander. "Furthermore," Alan continued, "we have learned of your dependence on Yadinium. Your greatest weakness is now known to us. Stand down and retreat, or face the consequences." For a moment there was silence. Then chaos erupted. Some Yadaran ships broke formation, turning tail and fleeing into the void. Others milled about uncertainly, their crews arguing and shouting over the comms. On Earth, the planet's defenders saw their chance. With the Yadaran fleet in disarray, they launched a coordinated assault, targeting the enemy ships with everything they had. Missiles and energy beams slammed into the Yadaran hulls, exploiting the gaps in their formation. Explosions lit up the void as Yadaran ships crumpled and shattered under the onslaught. The once mighty alien armada was reduced to a shambles, their coordination and discipline evaporating in the face of Earth's defiance. Amidst the chaos, Reed's ship wove through the battlefield, the rescued prisoners strapped into their seats. They docked with Alan's vessel, the airlock hissing open to reveal haggard but relieved faces. "Commander," Reed called out, stepping onto the bridge, "we've got Ambassador Nichols and the others, and they have intel on the Yadaran's yadinium supply." Alan nodded, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Get that information to Earth Command immediately. They need to start planning our counterattack." As Reed relayed the data, Alan felt a flicker of hope. For the first time since the invasion began, they had a real chance to turn the tide. But that hope was short-lived. An alarm blared, warning of a massive energy surge emanating from the direction of the Yadaran homeworld. The readings were off the scale, like nothing they had ever seen. "Sir," a sensor operator called out, her voice tight with fear, "the wormhole, it's destabilizing. Something's causing it to collapse." Alan's blood ran cold. If the wormhole closed with them on this side, they would be stranded, cut off from Earth and any hope of reinforcements. He turned to the helm, his decision made. "Plot a course back to the wormhole, maximum speed. We have to get through before it's too late." As the ship hurtled towards the swirling vortex, Alan's thoughts raced. The Yadarans must have had a failsafe in place, a way to seal off their space in the event of defeat. They were willing to sacrifice their own ships to prevent Earth from striking at their heart. The wormhole loomed before them, its edges flickering and distorting as the energy surge tore at its fabric. They had seconds, maybe less. Alan wrapped his hand around the chairs of his chair, his squeezing hard. "All hands, brace for transition," he barked. In the brig, Yaris began to laugh, a sound full of malice and madness. "You're too late, human," he sneered. "Even if you make it back to your pathetic planet, we will never stop. We will hunt you down, world by world, until the last human breathes their last." The ship plunged into the wormhole, the deck shuddering violently beneath their feet. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and warning alarms screamed. The turbulence was far worse than before, the wormhole bucking and heaving around them like a living thing. Alan held on for dear life, praying to whatever gods might be listening. They had come so far, sacrificed so much. They couldn't fail now, not when they were so close to turning the tide. With a final bone-jarring lurch, they emerged from the wormhole, the Earth looming before them like a blue and green jewel. But even as relief washed over the crew, Alan knew that their fight was not nearly finished. The Yadarans would come for them, driven by revenge and the need to erase the stain on their honor, and Earth would have to be ready, armed with their new knowledge of Yadinium and the desperation born of survival. As Alan looked out at the scarred and battered ships of Earth's fleet, he felt a grim willpower settle over him. They had won a battle, but the war stretched before them, long and bloody, and he would be there, leading the charge, until the Yadaran threat was ended once and for all. Alan's mind raced as he watched the wormhole's edges flicker and distort, the energy surge tearing at the very fabric of space-time. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the crew fought to maintain control. He knew they had mere seconds to make a decision, and the wrong choice could seal their fate. "Sir, the wormhole is collapsing," Lieutenant Reed shouted over the chaos. "We can't make it through." Alan gritted his teeth, his eyes darting to the tactical display. The Yadaran space station loomed nearby, a sprawling complex of docking bays and repair facilities. It was a risky move, but it might be their only chance. "Change of plans," he barked, his voice cutting through the din. "We're heading for that station. If we can't get back through the wormhole, we'll commandeer one of their long-range transports." Reed nodded, his fingers flying over the helm controls. The ship banked hard, its engines straining as they pushed towards the station. But the Yadarans had detected their approach, and the station's defenses roared to life. Energy beams lanced out from the station's turrets, searing the void around them. Reed jinked and wove, the ship shuddering as he pushed it to its limits. The hull groaned under the stress, the metal creaking ominously. "Hold on," Reed yelled, his face beaded with sweat. "This is going to be rough." With a bone-jarring impact, they slammed into the station's hangar bay, the ship's armored prow crumpling the alien metal. Sparks flew as they skidded across the deck, the scream of tortured metal filling the air. The ship ground to a halt, the sudden silence almost deafening. Alan was out of his seat in an instant, his pulse rifle already in his hands. "Hear everyone out now," he ordered, his voice hoarse from the smoke filling the bridge. The team piled out of the battered ship, weapons at the ready. The hangar bay was already swarming with Yadaran troops, their energy rifles spitting deadly bolts of light. Alan and his soldiers took cover behind the ship's wreckage, returning fire with unbreakable spirit. The air crackled with the exchange of weapons fire, the deck growing slick with blood and gore. Ambassador Nichols, to Alan's surprise, proved to be a capable fighter. The diplomat moved with the practiced ease of a soldier, his shots finding their mark with uncanny precision. "I wasn't always a diplomat," Nichols said with a grim smile, catching Alan's questioning look. "Served 2 tours with the Marines before I joined the Foreign Service." Alan nodded, a newfound respect for the man growing within him. Together they fought their way deeper into the station, the corridors ringing with the sounds of battle. As they pushed forward, the team stumbled upon a horrifying discovery. They breached a sealed door, revealing a hidden laboratory filled with grotesque horrors. Human bodies, twisted and mutated almost beyond recognition, floated in tanks of viscous fluid. Organs pulsed and writhed, exposed to the open air. "My God," Nichols breathed, his face pale. "What have they done?" Alan's grip tightened on his rifle, a cold rage settling in his gut. The Yadarans had been experimenting on humans, trying to uncover the secrets of their biology. The atrocities they had committed in the name of their conquest knew no bounds. "We have to stop them," Alan growled, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. "We have to make sure they never do this again." They pressed on, fighting their way through the station's defenders. The Yadarans fought with the desperate ferocity of cornered animals, but Alan's team was fueled by a righteous anger that would not be denied. At last, they reached the main hangar bay. A sleek Yadaran transport sat on the launch pad, its engines already humming with power. Freedom was within their grasp. But as they approached the ship, a figure staggered out from behind a stack of crates. It was Yaris, his face contorted with rage. He had broken free from his restraints in the chaos, and now he leveled a stolen weapon at Alan. "You think you've won, human?" Yaris snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You think you can defeat the Yadaran Empire? I will kill you myself, and reclaim my honor." Alan dove for cover as Yaris opened fire, the air sizzling with the heat of the energy bolts. He rolled to his feet, his own weapon coming up to bear. The two leaders faced each other, hatred burning in their eyes, as the fate of their peoples hung in the balance. Time seemed to slow as Yaris pulled the trigger, the energy bolt leaping from his weapon's muzzle. Alan braced for the searing impact, but it never came. Instead, Ambassador Nichols lunged forward, placing himself between Alan and certain death. The bolt struck Nichols square in the chest, burning through his flesh and bone. He crumpled to the deck, his face contorted in agony. Alan could only watch in horror as the man who had just saved his life gasped his last breaths. But there was no time to freeze. Reed, ever the quick draw, snapped his rifle up and put a bolt right between Yaris's eyes. The Yadaran leader's head snapped back, a smoking hole in his forehead. He toppled backwards, his lifeless body hitting the deck with a dull thud. Alan scrambled to Nichols' side, cradling the dying man's head in his lap. "Why?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Why did you do that?" Nichols coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Because you're the one who can end this, Alan. You have to let the galaxy know what the Yadarans have done. Rally them against the Empire. It's the only way." His eyes fluttered closed, his body going limp in Alan's arms. Alan bowed his head, grief and rage warring within him. Nichols had given his life for this cause, for the chance to bring the Yadarans to justice. He wouldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. With a heavy heart, Alan laid Nichols's body down gently. He stood, turning to his team. They looked back at him, their expressions a mix of sorrow and steadfast perseverance. "Let's go," Alan said, his voice hard as steel. "We've got a job to finish." They boarded the Yadaran transport, Reed taking the helm. As they lifted off from the hangar bay, Alan looked back at the station, his eyes narrowed. In the ship's hold, they found a treasure trove of data. Records of the Yadarans' experiments, their plans for conquest, the extent of their atrocities. It was all the evidence they needed to turn the tide of galactic opinion against the Empire. As they approached Earth, Alan felt a surge of relief at the sight of the planet's intact defenses. The Yadaran fleet, thrown into disarray by Yaris's capture, had been unable to press their advantage. Earth had held, if only just. Alan hailed Earth's leaders, uploading the damning evidence they'd uncovered. "Broadcast this on every frequency," he urged. "Let every race in the galaxy see what the Yadarans have done." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Outrage and condemnation poured in from every corner of the galaxy. Races that had once cowered before the Yadarans' might now rallied to Earth's cause, pledging ships and soldiers to the fight. And within the Yadaran fleet, doubt and dissent began to spread like wildfire. Ships broke formation, their crews unwilling to fight for an empire built on such monstrous lies. The once mighty armada began to fracture, Yadaran turning against Yadaran in the face of the truth. But Alan knew this was only the beginning. The Yadarans were weakened, but not beaten. To truly end their threat, they would have to strike at the heart of their power, the Yadinium mines on their homeworld. As his ship docked in Earth's orbital station, Alan was greeted by a sea of cheering faces. He and his team had become heroes, the saviors of Earth. But as the crowds chanted his name, all Alan could think of was the cost of their victory, the lives lost, the sacrifices made. And he thought of Nichols, the man who had given everything for this moment. Alan vowed that he would not let that sacrifice be in vain. He turned to his team, his eyes hard with purpose. "Get some rest," he ordered. "We've got a war to win." They had brought hope to Earth and the galaxy, but the fight was just getting started. Alan knew that the hardest battles were still to come, but with the truth on their side and the might of the galactic races at their back, he knew they would prevail. The Yadarans had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and now it was time to reap the whirlwind. As the Galactic Alliance mobilized for the final push against the Yadaran homeworld, Alan sat in his quarters, poring over the latest intelligence reports. The Yadaran fleet, while still formidable, was in disarray following Yaris's capture and the revelation of their atrocities. Defections were on the rise, and the once unbreakable Yadaran ranks were fracturing. A sudden chime from his comm unit broke Alan's concentration. He frowned, not recognizing the encrypted frequency. Cautiously, he opened the channel. "Commander Alan," a raspy voice crackled through the speaker. "I am Zoran, a high-ranking official within the Yadaran government. I have vital information that could change the course of this war." Alan leaned forward, his interest piqued. "I'm listening." "Not all Yadarans support the Empire's actions," Zoran continued. "Many of us have been working in secret to undermine the regime from within. We want to help you defeat the Loyalists and bring an end to this conflict." Alan's mind raced with the implications. Yadaran allies. It seemed too good to be true. "And what do you want in return?" he asked, his tone guarded. "Amnesty for the Yadaran civilians and resistance members," Zoran replied. "A guarantee that they will be treated fairly after the Empire falls." Alan hesitated. The offer was tempting, but he couldn't afford to let his guard down. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" "Meet me on the neutral planet of Taros," Zoran said. "I will bring proof of my claims and share the information you need to strike at the heart of the Yadaran war machine. Come alone." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Alan in silence. He weighed his options, the potential risks battling against the tantalizing promise of a swift end to the war. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Lieutenant Reed entered, his face etched with concern. "Commander, I couldn't help but overhear. You're not seriously considering meeting with this Zoran, are you?" Alan sighed. "I have to consider every option, Marcus. If he's telling the truth, this could be the break we've been looking for." Reed shook his head. "And if it's a trap? We can't trust the Yaderans, not after everything they've done." "I know," Alan said, his voice heavy. "That's why I need you to come with me. We'll take every precaution, but I have to see this through." Reed met Alan's gaze, his fists tight. "All right, Commander, I've got your back, but I don't like this." The journey to Taros was tense, the small shuttle carrying Alan and Reed cutting through the void like a knife. They landed on the outskirts of a desolate settlement, the wind whipping through the empty streets. Zoran was waiting for them in a dilapidated warehouse, his scaled face hidden beneath a hooded cloak. He greeted them with a curt nod, his eyes darting nervously. "Thank you for coming, Commander," he rasped, producing a data chip from his robes. "This contains everything you need to know about the Yaderan defenses and the location of the Yadinium mines. With this information and the support of the Resistance, you can end this war." Alan took the chip, turning it over in his hands. "And your people? How many are willing to fight against the Loyalists?" "More than you might think," Zoran replied. "We have been laying the groundwork for this moment for years. When you launch your attack, we will rise up from within, sowing chaos and confusion among the Yaderan ranks." Reed shifted uneasily, his hand resting on his holstered sidearm. "This all seems too convenient," he muttered. "How do we know this isn't a setup?" Zoran's eyes narrowed. "You think I would risk my life, the lives of my people, for some elaborate ruse? We want this war to end just as much as you do." Alan held up a hand, silencing Reed's retort. "We appreciate the risk you've taken in coming here, Zoran. You have my word that the Yaderan civilians and Resistance members will be treated fairly after the Empire's fall." Zoran nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Thank you, Commander. Together we can bring an end to this nightmare and forge a new path for both our peoples." Just as the meeting seemed to be concluding, the warehouse doors burst open with a deafening clang. A group of heavily armed Yaderans stormed in, their weapons trained on Alan, Reed, and Zoran. "Traitor!" the lead Yaderan snarled, his eyes blazing with fury. "Did you think we wouldn't discover your treachery, Zoran? The Empire will make an example of you and your human collaborators." Zoran reacted with lightning speed, drawing a concealed blaster and firing at the attackers. Alan and Reed dove for cover, their own weapons already in hand. The warehouse erupted into a chaotic firefight, energy bolts scorching the air and tearing through metal. Alan and Reed fought side by side, their movements fluid and coordinated from years of training and combat. Zoran proved to be a formidable ally, his aim true as he cut down the Yaderan loyalists with ruthless efficiency. Together, the unlikely trio pushed back against the ambush, the floor littered with the bodies of their fallen foes. But the tide of battle turned in an instant. A stray shot caught Zoran in the chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. Alan and Reed rushed to his side, laying down covering fire as they dragged him to safety. Zoran coughed, dark blood bubbling from his lips. "Go," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "Leave me. You must get the information back to your alliance." Alan shook his head, his grip tightening on Zoran's hand. "We're not leaving you behind. We'll get you out of here, get you medical attention." Zoran smiled weakly, his eyes already starting to glaze over. "No, Commander, my time is up. But you can still save my people, defend the galaxy from the Empire's tyranny." With a final shuddering breath, Zoran went limp, his life slipping away in Alan's arms. Alan bowed his head, a wave of grief washing over him for the brave Yaderan who had sacrificed everything for a chance at peace. Reed's urgent shout snapped him back to the present. "Commander, we have to move. More loyalists will be on the way." Alan nodded, his face grim with tenacity. He tucked the data chip securely into his pocket and rose to his feet, his weapon at the ready. "Let's go. We've got a war to win." As they fought their way out of the warehouse and back to their shuttle, Alan's mind raced with the implications of Zoran's information. With the support of the Yadaran resistance and the knowledge of the Empire's weaknesses, the Alliance could finally strike a decisive blow against the Yadaran homeworld. The final battle loomed on the horizon, a clash that would determine the fate of not only Earth, but the entire galaxy. And Commander Wayne Allen, forged in the crucible of war and tempered by loss, would be at the forefront, leading the charge against the crumbling Yadaran Empire. The Allied fleet burst from hyperspace, a massive armada of ships from a dozen worlds united against the Yadaran threat. At the vanguard flew the human vessels, their hulls scarred from countless battles, but still proud and defiant. On the bridge of the flagship, Commander Wayne Allen stood tall, his eyes fixed on the screen as the Yadaran homeworld loomed before them. "All ships, commence attack," he ordered, his voice steady. "Stick to the plan and watch each other's backs out there." Beside him, Lieutenant Marcus Reed grinned fiercely. "Let's show these bastards what happens when you mess with Earth." The fleet surged forward, weapons filled as they charged towards the Yadaran defenses. Swarms of enemy fighters rose to meet them, their hulls glinting in the light of the system's sun. The space between the two forces erupted into a maelstrom of fire and debris as the battle was joined. On the planet's surface, the Yadaran resistance launched their own assault. Cells of rebels armed with stolen weapons and guided by Zoran's intel struck at key military installations and power plants. Explosions bloomed across the Yadaran cities as the saboteurs wreaked havoc, sowing confusion and fear among the loyalist forces. In the capital, a group of resistance fighters stormed the central communications hub, gunning down the guards and planting explosive charges. As they fought their way back out, the leader of the group, a grizzled Yadaran named Tarek, activated the detonator. The hub vanished in a blinding flash, cutting off the loyalist forces from their commanders and throwing their response into disarray. High above, the Alliance fleet punched through the Yadaran orbital defenses, the combined might of their advanced weaponry overwhelming the enemy shields. Dropships and landing craft streaked towards the surface, carrying thousands of Allied soldiers to the battleground below. Allen and Reed led the charge, their strike team hitting the ground near the primary Yadinium mine. They emerged into a hellscape of smoke and fire, the mine's perimeter defenses already hammering the area with artillery and heavy weapons. "Go, go, go," Allen roared, sprinting forward as energy bolts sizzled past him. Reed and the others followed close behind, their weapons spitting death at the Yadaran defenders. They fought their way into the mine complex, the close confines of the tunnels and chambers, turning the battle into a brutal close-quarters melee. Allen and his team advanced meter by blood-soaked meter, the Yadarans contesting every step with fanatical zeal. In the heart of the mine, they burst into the central control room, only to find the Yadaran Emperor waiting for them. The towering alien stood amidst a nest of wires and conduits, a cruel smile on his scarred face. "Welcome, Commander Allen," the Emperor hissed. "You're just in time to witness the end of your pathetic alliance." He gestured to the web of explosives laced through the room, the detonators blinking menacingly. "I've rigged this entire facility to blow. In a few moments, we'll all be nothing more than atoms drifting in the void. Your fleet, your army, your precious Earth, all will fall." Allen raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Not if we stop you first, you son of a bitch." The Emperor laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You can't stop me, human. You've already lost." He reached for the detonator, his clawed finger hovering over the trigger. Allen tensed, knowing he couldn't shoot in time. Suddenly, Reed launched himself at the Emperor, tackling the alien in a desperate lunge. They crashed to the floor, grappling furiously as the detonator skittered away. "Go!" Reed yelled, his face contorted with effort as he struggled to pin the Emperor down. "Get out of here now!" Allen hesitated for a split second, torn between the urge to save his friend and the knowledge that he had to complete the mission. With a final agonized glance at Reed, he turned and led the rest of the team in a mad dash for the exit. They burst from the mine just as a massive explosion ripped through the complex, the shockwave hurling them to the ground. Alan rolled to his feet, his ears ringing and his vision blurred. He staggered forward, the taste of ash and blood heavy on his tongue. Around him, the battle still raged, but the tide had turned. The Yadaran loyalists, their command structure shattered and their persistence broken, were falling back in disarray. Allied soldiers poured into the breach, securing the remaining Yadinium mines and cutting off the enemy's vital supply lines. In the skies above, the last of the Yadaran warships fled before the advancing Alliance fleet, their once mighty armada reduced to a shattered remnant. The Yadaran Empire, which had once seemed an unstoppable juggernaut, was crumbling like a house of cards. But for Alan the victory was hollow. As he stood amidst the ruins of the mine, his thoughts turned to Reed, to the friend who had sacrificed everything to give them this chance. He thought of Ambassador Nichols, of Zoran, of all the brave souls who had given their lives to bring them to this moment. Tears stung his eyes as he looked out over the war-torn landscape. They had won, but at what cost? How many more would have to die before the galaxy knew true peace? He shook his head, pushing aside the grief and the doubt. There would be time to mourn to honor the fallen, but now there was still work to be done. The Yadaran resistance was already moving to fill the power vacuum left by the Empire's collapse, working to build a new government founded on the principles of freedom and justice. Earth, too, had a role to play in shaping the future of the galaxy, a future free from the spectre of tyranny and oppression. Alan squared his shoulders, his eyes hardening with determination. He would not let the sacrifices of his comrades be in vain. He would fight on, for as long as it took, to make their vision of a better tomorrow a reality. For Reed, for Nichols, for Zoran, and for all the others who had fallen, he would endure. The road ahead would be prolonged and difficult, but he would not falter. The galaxy would know peace, even if he had to build it with his own 2 hands. In the aftermath of the battle, Alan stood before a makeshift memorial, the names of the fallen etched into its surface. The weight of their loss pressed down on him like a physical burden, a constant reminder of the price they had paid for victory. He traced his fingers over Reed's name, the pain of his friend's death still raw and aching. Reed had been more than just a comrade in arms. He had been a brother, a constant presence at Alan's side through the darkest days of the war. Beside Reed's name was Nichols, the diplomat who had become a soldier, who had given his life to save Alan's own. And there was Zoran, the brave Yadaran rebel, who had risked everything to help them, only to fall in the final battle. So many names, so many lives cut short, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. The Yadaran Empire was gone, its reign of terror at an end. The galaxy could breathe free once more, the shadow of tyranny lifted from its shoulders. And yet, even as he mourned the fallen, Alan knew that the fight was not over. There would always be those who sought to impose their will on others, to crush the weak and the innocent beneath their heel. As long as that threat remained, he would stand against it, a guardian of the peace they had bought with blood and tears. He turned from the memorial, his eyes lifting to the stars above. Out there a new future beckoned, a future shaped by the choices they made in the here and now. Earth would be a part of that future, a beacon of hope and strength in a galaxy still reeling from the scars of war. And Alan would be there, leading the charge, fighting for the dream of a better tomorrow. For the sake of the fallen, for the sake of all those who had sacrificed and suffered, he would not rest until that dream was made real. The road would be long, the struggles many, but he would not falter. He was Wayne Allen, commander of the Earth Defense Force, protector of the innocent and defender of the peace, and he would never stop fighting for what was right, whatever it takes. As he strode away from the memorial, his shoulders squared and his head held high, he knew that the spirit of those he had lost walked with him still, guiding his steps and strengthening his grit. Their memory would be his armor, their sacrifice his sword, and with them at his side he would face whatever challenges the future might bring, unafraid and unbreakable. The galaxy would never forget the heroes who had given their lives to save it, and neither would he. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.